He's stepping up, taking on the role, being our song leader here, and I'm proud of him. I'm honored to have him here as a member. But the way, it's interesting to me. We've had these young families in the last year added to our church, and it just jumped in with both feet, and just it's such a blessing. And I can tell you that I know from experience that when you get young families into the church, new families into the church, a lot of times the older members of the church, the ones that have been there longer, not just older, but longer standing members, are a little apprehensive about it, not sure about all these people jumping in and getting involved and all that. That's not the case here. The folks that have been here and see, I don't mean it to sound mechanical, but see the new blood coming in, they're excited as I am about it. And just so grateful. I was thinking yesterday, I went home yesterday thinking just I was exhausted. And I know a lot of y'all were too. But just looking at everything that got done that I didn't do.
Amen.
And Bonnie, you've been proud of me yesterday. I delegated. And it's kind of like reminds me of that story. That preacher was sneaking out in the middle of the night, and his wife was concerned about it. It looked suspicious. He was going out in the middle of the night. She called up, she talked to the head deacon of the church. She said, I don't know what's going on with the pastor, but he's leaving, and I don't know where he's going. Would you help me? Would you fight? He says, yeah, I'll sit outside your house, and if he leaves, I'll follow. So she did. And he went out, and he saw the pastor leave, and so he kind of followed him. Pastor drove down, followed him to the train station. And then he went inside the train station. The deacon kind of slipped in behind him, kind of followed him without wanting to be noticed. And he looks, and the pastor walks out onto the deck where the trains are coming in and leaving. And the pastor's just standing there watching the trains come and go. And the deacon didn't know if he was waiting on somebody. Watched him for about an hour. He never talked to anybody. He never left. He just standing there watching those trains come in and go out, come in and go out. Finally, the deacon got up enough courage to approach him. He went out there and he said, hey, pastor, and turned around and said, hey, brother, how are you? Nice to see you. Wasn't shocked or surprised or anything. Didn't act suspicious. He said, preacher, I got to tell you something. He said, your wife's worried about you. He said, you're sneaking out in the middle of the night. Is this what you're doing? You're coming down here to the train station? He said, yeah. Yeah, I'm just coming down here watching the trains move in and out. He said, why are you doing that? He says, because it's real nice to watch something move that I don't have to push. And I know a lot of preachers in that boat, and some of them bring it on themselves. They want to micromanage. They don't want people to. They figure I'd rather do it myself. And I'd rather give you the opportunity to do it not exactly the way I do it, because I want it to be your church, and your investment is more than appreciated. You're taking ownership of this church. You're making your church, and that's as much as I could ask for. I want that. I desperately want that for every person that comes to this church. I want them to be involved, not just to get a job done, but I want them to be invested in the work. I want this to be our ministry. It's not just my ministry, it's your ministry. And I'm very grateful. It's tremendous. I can't begin to tell you the joy that it brings me for y'all to to get involved like that and something to move that I don't have to push. I can give you some direction. Genesis chapter 26. Genesis chapter 26. And stand with me if you would. And I'm going to begin reading in, let's see, there's so much here and there's a lot of context to what I'm reading. And I want to get to it. Y'all, I went home this afternoon and crashed. I started getting a migraine. I had a rapid onset migraine this afternoon. I went home and I took some heavy drugs and I choked out. I was nauseated and dizzy. And so I went home, took some drugs and crashed. And my wife was gracious enough. And Gage told the other brother, said, we got to behave. Dad feels bad. We got to behave ourselves today. And let's be real good for Mom and Dad. They got to be real good for us every day. But I appreciated that. And yeah, but I managed to. I don't know. I'm not in pain right now, so, but it leaves you really just kind of feeling like a wet rag to go through that. And it did pass quickly. I've had those that lasted 6 to 8 hours. This one only lasted about 3 hours, so I was grateful for that. Genesis chapter, Genesis chapter 26. Let me begin reading in verse number 12. And I may read a few passages just to get into it here. Genesis chapter 26, verse number 12. And the Bible says, then Isaac sowed in the land and received in the same year 100-fold. And the Lord blessed him. And the man waxed great and went forward and grew into and became very great until he became very great. For he had possessions and flocks and possessions of herds and great stores of servants. And the Philistines, now they're the ones that possessed the land at this point. The Philistines envied him for all the wells which his father's servants had digged in the days of Abraham, his father. The Philistines had stopped them and filled them with earth unto Isaac. Verse 16. And Abimelech said unto Isaac, Abimelech is the king of the Philistines. And don't get confused. The Abimelech that was king when Abraham was in the land, that Abimelech that dealt with Abraham, and this Abimelech are two different Abimelechs. The name Abimelech means the son of a king. That's what the name means. So Abimelech in verse number 16, different Abimelech. And Abimelech said unto Isaac, go from us, for thou art much mightier than we. And Isaac departed thence and pitched his tent in the valley of Gerar and dwelt there. And Isaac digged again the wells of water which they had digged in the days of Abraham his father, for the Philistines had stopped them after the death of Abraham. And he called their names after the names which his father had called them. When he's saying his father, he's referring to Abraham, his father. In their lineage, Abraham was his father. I know that Isaac was his dad, but Abraham was the father. He was the patriarch. Verse 19, and Isaac's servants digged in the valley and found there wells springing of water, and herdmen and Gerar and the herdmen of Gerar did strive with Isaac's herdmen, saying, the water is ours, and called the name of the place Esek, which means strife, and became because they strove with him, and they digged another well, and strove at that also, and called the name of it Sitnah. And he removed from thence and digged another well, for that they strove not. And he called the name of it Rehoboth. And he said, for now the Lord hath made for us, made room for us, and we shall be fruitful in the land. But I want you to notice, I want to draw your attention to the verse in 18, verse number 18. And Isaac digged again the wells of water which they had digged in the days of Abraham his father. For the Philistines had stopped them after the death of Abraham, and had called their names after the names by which his father had called them. Father, bless the reading of your word. Use it to your honor and glory, and I pray these things in thy name. Amen. As I preached this morning, I made the statement. Thank you. You may be seated. I preached this morning about Abraham building altars, and how that everywhere Abraham went, he did two things. Every place he settled, he built an altar and he dug a well. That's a picture of providing two things for your family. They provided, first off, he provided for their physical needs in digging the well. And secondly, he provided for their spiritual needs in building the altar. But Abraham died. And the Philistines who possessed the land, remember, God hadn't given it to them yet. The Philistines that possessed that land buried the wells that Abraham had dug. Now Isaac, his son, comes along. And he is sojourning in the land, and he becomes great and prosperous in the land. And God blesses him. The Bible said, and God blessed him. I was thinking at this time, we were in a church one time. My wife and I were in a church one time. I was a youth pastor for a short time in this church. And the pastor did a lot more reading books about the Bible than he did reading the Bible, I think. And I mean, no disrespect to that, but my wife and I were sitting there. Of course, my wife, she graduated valedictorian of her Christian school and went to Bible college and everything. So she was a very good Bible student. And we're sitting there in service one time, and the pastor, and we weren't even married then, were we? Yeah, we were still just dating, and we were engaged. We were engaged to be married, but we hadn't gotten married yet. And we were sitting there, and the pastor said something about how Abraham was rich, and he said, I just think probably, he said, it's my opinion that Abraham probably got that wealth by ill-gotten means. And Terry was sitting there looking down at her Bible, and she looked up real quick at him and looked at me and looked at him and she starts taking her Bible, and she pokes me and then points to the verse where Eleazar is telling Laban and his father, the Lord hath richly blessed my master with houses and lands. So he didn't get it by ill-gotten means. God gave him that. I never forget. And I'm like, wow, okay, we're just gonna. All right, but he was a hyper Calvinist anyway. So, but anyway, I learned the hard way about what Calvinists were, and figured that out. But God blessed him just as he had blessed. But there was strife with the neighbors. The Philistines. By the way, they are the ancestors of the Palestinians, if that helps you out any, in their relationship with Israel. They are the ancestors of the modern day Palestinians, if you want to know who the Philistines are, you see. That's kind of where they, so this animosity, this grudge match between the Jews and the Palestinians has been going on for a long time. And there's strife between them. I want you to note something. Ask yourself this question. I was asking. Abraham dug these wells, and the Philistines covered them up. Wouldn't you think in an area where water is life, wouldn't you think that they would want those wells open? Wouldn't you think they would want those wells open? Let me tell you something. The world will reject our message to their own detriment. Even if I can prove that it's to their benefit. My dad was preaching one time. He said, if the story of Christ wasn't true, I'd still want to live like a Christian because it's just a good way to live. You look at the way that the Mormons profess to live. Some of that among the fundamental Mormons is there's stories coming out that it's not quite as pristine as one would think. But you look at the way Mormons live and how they take care of one another and their community spirit and everything is a good thing. Now, one pastor said Mormonism is a great way to live. It's just a terrible way to die. Just a terrible, it's a great philosophy to live by. It's just a horrible doctrine by which to die. And again, you have to be very careful with these because they sound so much like they're using the same words we're using. But I'm going to tell you something. When they start talking about Jesus, the Son of God, they're not talking about the same Jesus their definitions are different than ours. That's something you must be very keenly aware of, especially when we get into this personal evangelism study. We will touch a little bit. The book goes into great detail. The textbook I'm going to present to you goes into great detail about how to deal with different cults, different religions, and how to witness to different religions, that kind of thing. I'll cover a little bit of that in the class, but I won't touch on it much because I want to focus more on how to get that plan in. But they covered up the wells. We see the strife with the neighbors and Isaac having to separate himself more and more and more from the Philistines. And finally, he gets to Rehoboth and he digs the wells there, and they don't fight him for those wells. And I noticed that he did two things. He needed water, and what he did was he decided to dig the wells that Abraham had dug. It seems foolish to start looking for a place to find water and to dig wells when you know where the water was when Daddy dug the well. It doesn't make any sense for me to go find wells of water when I can look and say, well, Dad found water here, so that's where I'm going to dig. Not only that, but I'm going to name them after the same name that Dad called them. I want to speak to you tonight a little while about redigging the wells of our fathers. Redigging the wells of our fathers. There was a time in our nation when we lived by the Judeo-Christian ethic. That's what it was called. We labeled things differently. It's funny. Today we have such politically correct names, and I'm not just talking about liberal spin. We put different names on things, don't we? It went from being a janitor to being a custodian. you know. It went from, it's funny, in Arlington, Texas, where we grew up, there's a nursing home there. When I was a kid, they called it an old folks home. I thought everybody just went, I just thought you got to a certain age and they locked you up. You know, when I was a kid, that's what I just thought happened. You know, old folks home. And there's one that's been there for, good night, it's been there for 100 years. And it is the Masonic Nursing Home. And they call it now it's called, the name of the place is the Masonic Retirement and Assisted Living Center. Doesn't that sound nice? But on the original building, the name of the place is in stone at the top of the building. This is a historic building. And so the facade on the building has a Home for Aged Masons. I thought, well, that's kind of plain. They're calling it right out there what it is. You know, we have interesting, we want to make it sound pretty, you know. And we want to find the world. You see, here's what has happened is the world has dug their own wells. They've covered up the wells of our fathers. And we had a nation at one time, there was a time, my pastor, Dr. Bob Smith, made the statement one time. He said, when I was a boy, lost people lived better than some Christians live today. The heathen reprobate down the road still knew it was the right thing to pay his bills, still knew it was the right thing to take care of your family, still knew it was the right thing to abide by the law. Former director of the FBI, J. Edgar Hoover, said, if we teach a generation to honor the laws of God, we will have little difficulty teaching them to honor the laws of man. Isaac knew better than to try to dig wells where he could find no water. No, he was going to dig wells where he knew Abraham had found water, where he knew. So what did he do? He redigged the wells of his father. The enemy will always try to steal away what we have. We see it, it's much more prevalent now. There's a much more of a push now to do away with the nuclear family. In Washington, D.C., the Museum of Black History has come out with a list of things that are inappropriate because they're white. There's nothing racist about saying that now, is there? And one of them is one of the false concepts of the white race is the nuclear family, the mom and the dad. Of all the things to get rid of, mom and the dad. Our culture has moved away from that Judeo-Christian ethic. It was Barack Obama who said, we no longer live in a Christian nation. Christians got real upset with him about that, but it's true. We were once a Christian nation. And as the French philosopher said, I sought for what was great in America, and I looked at their resources, I looked at their industry, I looked at their government, which was all unsurpassed, and I looked for the greatness in America. But I did not find the greatness in America there. I found the greatness in America in the pulpits, which were aflame with the gospel. And he made this conclusion: America is a great nation because he said, America is great because America is good. That's what Francis de Tocqueville said he said, America is great because America is good. And he said, when America ceases to be good, it will cease to be great. And it scares me that we might head there now. What is our solution? Our solution is not the solution that most are looking for. Our solution is not to find a new plan, a new method, a new message for a new generation. And I've heard those slogans, if you will, in churches and evangelical churches today. A new message for a new generation. A new generation does not need a new message because there's no water in them. Now, when you start going back to redig the wells of your fathers, there's going to be some strife. I'll talk to you about what those wells are here in a moment. There's going to be some strife in this world for that. There are going to be those who say we don't need to redig those old wells. I'll remind you that God spoke of the judgment that he brought on the nation of Israel in Jeremiah chapter 2, verse 13. He said, "For my people have committed two evils. They have forsaken the fountain of living waters and hewed them out cisterns, broken cisterns, which hold no water." You know what a cistern is? A cistern is what they used to dig. It's not a well. It's a storage unit in the ground where they stored water that they brought up from the well. And it was made out of clay. They would dig it out and they would bake clay tiles and they would line this hole with clay tiles and they would fill it with water for storage. They would bring water and store it in there. That's what a cistern is. And the cisterns, if they weren't made properly, would crack and they pour water in there and the water would leak out and they'd end up with broken cisterns that would not hold water. You ever heard somebody say that somebody makes a statement and say, well, that just doesn't hold water. That's what that means. That's where that came from. And what we have done in Christianity today is we have hewn out cisterns. We have brought in a user-friendly religion. We have brought ourselves to a place where we have sought what they call it seeker-friendly or seeker-sensitive. We'll put it. That's the phrase they use. A seeker-sensitive religion that holds no water. The power of God is not there. It's all about demographics and marketing. Yeah, I get the emails every day. I get dozens of emails. I got 100. One day last week, I got 143 emails. And I opened 3 of them, and the rest of them I dumped without even opening them. And I can tell you that 90% of them was some preacher or some minister trying to sell me a set of books on how to build a church or how to address the issues of. I know how to address the issues. We need to get back to redig. We had to redig the wells of our fathers. Because these other wells, these cisterns that you've dug are not holding water. Can I tell you that the cisterns, can I tell you that the wells that our fathers and not our spiritual fathers, I'm talking about those who stood on this old gospel, this old time religion. Can I tell you that they worked? Can I tell you that they healed families and they saved souls and they brought people to Christ and they spread the missions message around the world? Can I tell you that it worked? Let me give you an old philosophy, a great old proverb. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. And what we're doing is we're looking for something new for the sake of something new. And I know that I know your heart, church. I know your heart. And I know that's not you. I know that you are the ones, you're the kind of people, I know that you're the right kind of parents. I know that you're the right kind of church members. I know you folks are, for some reason I was just, my brain works this way. My brain's real wrung out right now because of the headache. But when I said, I immediately thought of, when I said you're the right kind of parents, I immediately thought of Professor Harold Hill from The Music Man. You know, I know you River City folks are the right kind of parents, which is really cool because that was filmed right down here in the village of East Davenport. I don't know if you know that. If you ever want to see a good, fun musical to watch that's clean and appropriate with good music, Lerner and Lowe. I mean the original Music Man. I don't mean that one with that babyface freak in it that they made back in the 80s, but the old one with Shirley Jones and Buddy Hackett, and I think it wasn't Harv Presnell. I can't remember the name of the actor that played that, but you ought to watch that sometime. For some reason, that just went through my mind when I said that. But you're the kind of people, you are the right kind of people that you're looking for something. You want those wells dug. You want to draw from the right kind of wells. Let me give you something real quick here. There will always be strife, number one. Number two, our fathers knew where to dig. Our fathers knew where to dig. They knew what was right. They knew where the water was. Why would I go looking for water somewhere when my dad dug a well over here and I knew there was water there? They blocked it up. That doesn't mean that the well went dry. It means that they blocked it up because they didn't like him. His enemies, after he died, his enemies covered the well. So what we need to do is we need to redig the wells of our fathers. We need to redig the well. As a church, we've got to redig the well of doctrine. To redig the well of doctrine. What do you mean by redig the well of doctrine? I don't know if you've noticed this or not, but with every new version of the Bible comes new doctrines. Because you see, if the Bible doesn't say what our Bible said, then the Bible says something different, and the Bible says something different. Guess what? You're going to get different doctrines. I heard a man on the radio that they called the Bible Answer Man. And he made the statement to a woman called in, and she said, I need you to give me some Bible verses to tell my teenage son that he needs to keep himself sexually pure until marriage. And I was driving down the road when he got on there and he made that statement, or when this came in. And this was years ago. And I was stunned about ran off the road when I heard his answer. Well, I don't know that I can give you specific Bible verses that tell you that it's wrong to have relations before marriage. But the principle, I'm thinking, okay, I don't know what Bible you're using, but I got a Bible that says flee fornication. I got a Bible that has half of chapter over there in Proverbs chapter 7 that tells a man how many times in this Bible says to flee from the woman, flee from the whorish woman. How many times I can come up with verses, flee youthful lust, flee fornication. I can show you all kinds of verses. Hey, how about thou shalt not commit adultery? There's a good one. The Bible, I don't have an answer man, needs to get a Bible and get back to doctrine. One of the problems, and by the way, like I said, if you spend more time reading books about the Bible than you do about the Bible, you're going to come up with all kinds of cool new doctrines. The Calvinism in evangelical circles slays me. I didn't know what Calvinism was until I went to Bible college and had somebody tell me that not everybody can get saved. What? What do you mean not everybody can get saved? Yes, everybody can get saved. No. I said, look, the Bible says, whosoever calleth upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. Well, that means whosoever of the elect. I said, that's not what it says. Now, there are certain versions of the Bible, yeah. There are versions of the Bible I can take you and show you that very clearly state that you have to be baptized in order to be saved. You know, if I got a Bible that over here, it says David killed Goliath, and I got another Bible that says Abigdon killed Goliath, at least one of those is wrong. We have to redig the well of doctrine. We have to redig the wells of biblical authority. Listen, don't ever be afraid and don't ever be apologetic about the fact that you stand on this old book. Don't ever be afraid. Well, you know, I don't want to fall back on those old, you know, I've grown past a lot of those old archaic doctrines. How's that working out for you? You know how many pastors I know that have church members that are alcoholics and aren't trying to not be alcoholics? Shacking up outside of wedlock. I mean, I look at, I know, God bless them, I know some preachers that have stopped being preachers and have become ministers. And they are all about teaching deeper life theology in their churches, and their church members are going to hell. I can look at the lives of their church members and I see absolutely no spiritual influence whatsoever. It's time to redig some wells. It's time to redig the wells of evangelism. I'm tired of people telling me how to build a church. I'm tired of people telling me they've got a new gimmick, a new system. Because they're all out there. So one preacher said, you know, that this guy's charging $500 and something, charging nearly, it's like $495. Charging $495 for his online, $495 for his online program to tell a pastor what we should have been taught in Bible college. And how to do that. We were taught this already. Let's get back to it. Get back to the simple plan of salvation. Get back to evangelism. Redig the well of doctrine. Redig the wells of evangelism. We call it, here's a term, some of you may have never heard of this term until you heard me say it, soul winning. Anybody here not heard that term before you heard me say it? Everybody heard that? Good. See? You see what I'm saying? That's evangelism. That's getting back to evangelism. Getting back to, we got to redig the wells of doctrine. We've got to redig the wells of evangelism. We've got to redig the wells of biblical authority. We've got to get back to, we've got to redig the wells of biblical authority. This is our final authority. Do you know I'm not the final authority around here? I'm just the mailman. I'm just the message boy. This is your final authority. I could die in my sleep tonight. You still have the authority. You walk out here with a copy of the final authority under your arm. Because this is our final. We have got to get back to the love of Scripture. We've got to get back to our hunger for biblical principles and what is right biblically, scripturally. We've got to get back to, and this, I touched on this before when I made the comments about you as a church. We've got to get back to the well of church fellowship. Now, what I mean by that is, you know, we've been in a pandemic, and a lot of folks have gone online. You know, there was, I don't know if it was Barna Research. They do a lot of research. I don't know if it was Barna, if it was some other research group, but there was a research group that said that 2 years out, once we get past this pandemic, there's a good possibility that up to 25% of the people that were attending church regularly will never go back. Listen, online church will not replace this. You can't have the fellowship. Now, I get it. We had the Milos were here this morning. Michael and Janice were here. They've been watching faithfully, and I met with them. I met with them in the home, and what a precious couple. And they were concerned, and they were here today. They're venturing out once they got past the pandemic, the most difficult part of this. They feel safe getting out again, and they're getting back in church. I'll tell you something. They're not the kind I'm worried about, because she's a PK. She's a preacher's kid. Her daddy was a Southern Baptist preacher, baptized her in the river. And then 2 years afterwards, he got saved. And this was before they met. Now, this is according to Michael. He baptized him 2 years after he baptized her. Her daddy baptized him in the river, right where she got baptized. And they got married. They're serving the Lord and love the Lord. But there's a generation coming up that is so electronicized, if I can use that word. They're so into the internet, and we're so into we've lost. We learned all these ways to communicate, and lost our way of connecting. We can communicate. We know how to communicate, but we forgot how to connect. We got to get back to the authority of the local church. You know, there was a time when churches influenced their communities, and we need to get back to that. And I'm not talking about social services either. Anybody can put up a food pantry and a clothing closet. What we need to do is we have got to be the lighthouse. We've got to get back to biblical authority. We've got to get back to that foundation of the church, and it's it being the lighthouse of the moral standard, to be the moral compass for the community. But that means us being the moral compass, doesn't it? We've got to get back to, we need to redig the well of holy living. We've got to redig the well. We've got to, I get articles, these news pop-ups, when I'm on the internet, these news sites that I have followed, they put those little blurbs out there, and they're always talking about all these terrible things that these Hollywood people are doing. The latest, some actor that, the name of it, and I don't even know which actor it was, because I don't, seriously, folks, Hollywood could slide off into the ocean tomorrow, and I wouldn't skip a beat. I'm serious. I don't know who these people are, and I don't care. I don't care who they are. I don't care what movies they're. I don't care what they stood. Oh, so and so and so and so said this about Trump. I don't care. We get all bent out of shape when we hear that some actor, somebody who gets paid to pretend to be somebody else, got up and made some statement and criticized church. So what? They criticize religious leaders for, so what? Been criticizing us since Jesus was on the earth. Jesus said they would. Okay, fine. I don't care what. Look, I heard somebody say, beware when all men speak well of you. There's some people, I don't want them to talk nice about me. There's some people, if they're talking nice about me, something's wrong. I mean, I want them to know that we're good, decent, honest people, and that we're friends and we're loving and all that. That's not what I'm talking about. Dr. Robert Jeffers, pastor of First Baptist Church of Dallas, Texas, started a great controversy about 2 years ago in a message, in a book that he put out, and in a message that he preached. Great controversy. You know what he said? He said, there is no other way to heaven outside of Jesus Christ. Since when is that controversial? That's been the Baptist message since there have been Baptists. Why is that all of a sudden controversial? I mean, isn't it? And there were Southern Baptist pastors that distanced themselves from him over it. And I thought, good. I told my pastor one time, I said, yeah, I've read a study about how many churches closed their doors last year. Do you know how many thousands of churches closed their doors? He looked at me and said, son, he said, ever occur to you that some of them churches needed to close their doors? And I look around town thinking, if they closed their doors, it wouldn't make a lick of difference in this town if they closed their doors. Abraham died. That changed the whole topography over there because all the wells got stopped up by his enemy. Talk about cutting off your nose to spite your face. Abraham spent his life building altars and digging wells. And our spiritual forefathers dug some great wells. And we don't need to get water anywhere else. Modern religion, modern church, modern culture, our godless culture around us have stopped up those wells. They buried those wells, and we're embarrassed to dig them up. Don't be. Paul said, for I am not ashamed of the gospel of Jesus Christ, for it is the power of God unto salvation, both to the Jews first and also to the Greek. Let's redig some wells. Let's get back to the foundations that work. Let's get back to biblical principle. Get back to redigging the wells. That's why I'm teaching this class in evangelism. You want to see your church grow? One of the former presidents of I don't know why I'm quoting a lot of Southern Baptists tonight. Don't get nervous. We ain't joining no convention. I know pastors that I broke fellowship with because they went to independent fundamental Baptist churches and raised a bunch of money to start their church, and then once they got established, they went off into New Age, went off the deep end into this New Age praise and worship emerging church saddleback model business. After getting money from a bunch of old-time hellfire and damnation preachers that wanted to spread the gospel somewhere, and they went out and started a social services outfit. Ticked me off. Let's redig the wells where we know the water is. The well, we've got to have the power of the Holy Spirit of God on us. I'm going to say more about that next Sunday night. We'll touch on that as we begin our series on evangelism. Let's all stand. I gotta quit running out of soap, as they say. Heads bowed and eyes closed. Don't be afraid to do what you know is right, because somebody else will ridicule it. They will. They'll ridicule it. They'll ridicule when we do right. That's okay. I don't expect everybody to like us. I'm not going to go out of my way to make enemies. Not going to do that. I'm not going to be contentious just for the sake of being contentious, but I am going to contend for the faith. Earnestly contend for the faith. Let's get back to biblical principles. Say, preacher, God spoke to my heart through the message tonight. Pray for me. Just slip your hand up. There's some wells we need to redig. Thank you. Thank you. You can put your hands down. We're going to have a couple of verses of invitation. God's dealing with your heart tonight. It's your opportunity to come. Father, this is our message tonight. Thank you for these people. Lord, I cannot express to them what they do to my heart, just being with them. I love them. I pray, Father, that you bless them greatly I pray you bless now this invitation. Speak to hearts and lives. Use it for honor and glory. Amen. As music plays, the altar's open. And you need to come to the altar tonight. Just meet with the Lord. Let Him speak to you tonight. We have one more verse of invitation. One coach, verse of invitation. It's your opportunity. All right, we're going to be dismissed in prayer. Here in a moment, I'm going to ask Brother Joe Moore if he would dismiss us. Please be in your place Wednesday night, 7 p.m. For our evening service. And as I said, be praying as we get into warmer weather. And some of the things we're going to be doing. I was talking yesterday. I'm going to be getting with Brother Chad here in this next week about, remind me, help me to remember, about when as it gets warmer and we get a little more lax with this pandemic, with the restrictions and everything. Of course, we're wide open. We've almost anything we want, but I want people to be comfortable with it. We're going to be launching a veterans outreach ministry. Brother Chad is going to be heading that up and helping us in reaching veterans, 22 veterans a day in the United States. 22?
22 on average.
On an average, 22 veterans a day commit suicide in the United States. And that's unacceptable. And the answer is not psychological. The answer is not even medical. The answer is spiritual. And you'll hear me say that a lot because all the questions and all the ills of our culture and our society that we're facing today, it is a spiritual problem. And the solution is a spiritual solution. And here, I hope by May, we can plan on having a big veterans breakfast here. I'm going to be promoting it with the veterans groups around here and get a hold of American Legion Post and all that and advertise it, promote it, and hope to have a breakfast here for veterans. We'll have a time where we have regular meetings for our veterans and have different maybe have different speakers in, Christian speakers, of course, veterans. I'm not a veteran. I can't look at them and say I understand. But I want to get them into a place where they're understood. So keep that in your prayers. Pray for souls. Pray for your church. I'm praying for and working toward 10 new families this year. That is a monumental task. But God's already done monumental things here. So I just want to try God on for size. Keep that in mind. Brother Joe, would you dismiss us in prayer, please?
Dear Lord, thank you for the opportunity to hear from your word. And be with each and every one of us as we go away, and help us to have discernment so that we stay with the biblical principles and that we keep our families in the correct doctrine. And please, all this in your name.